Christmas, New Year's, and are staying healthy. Yes. Okay. All right, I'd like to call this special meeting of the Prince County Board of Education order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Roll call.
Mrs. Dalton? Here. Mrs. Eckenrode? Here. Mr. Hardesty?
Here. Here.
Mr. Packer?
Here.
Mr. Polenic?
Here.
Mrs. Tate? Here. Mr. Rainey?
Here.
Mrs. Smiley? Here. Mrs. Williams? Here. I am present. Mr. Johnston?
Here.
Mrs. Dolges? Here. Mrs. Zeglin? Here. Mr. Grimaldi?
Here.
Mr. Dalton?
Here. Here.
Mr. Gramling?
Here.
Mrs. Dalby? Here. Mr. Saffron is excused.
Okay, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Questions or discussion? Okay, hearing on the agenda will stand approved as printed. Any citizens' remarks this evening? Business? Okay, we have two items. The first is hire a business manager. Can we have a motion to hire Jennifer Sleppy as business manager at an annual salary of $82,000 on an effective date to be determined by district administration based upon the release of Mrs. Sleppy from her current employer? Do we have a motion?
Motion.
I'll second.
Question or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Polenic?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Rainey?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Rainey, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. And 4B, appoint board secretary. And we have a motion to appoint Nicole Peterson as board secretary effective immediately to fulfill the unexpired term of Joshua Muscatello, July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2025, who resigned October the 10th, 2021 at an annual stipend of $2,500.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Questions? Roll call.
Mr. Polenic?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Rainey?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Williams, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
Congratulations, Mrs. Peterson.
Thank you.
Okay, immediately following this special meeting, we'll have our committee meeting and then our board meeting next Wednesday, January the 12th at 7 p.m. Okay, is there any other business that needs brought before the board this evening? Okay, hearing on this meeting is adjourned. And we'll move right into the committee meeting, and I will turn the agenda over to Mr. Johnston.
Want to take a look at your agenda for the committee meeting. There are no citizens here this evening, so no citizen remarks. We have nothing under number 3, 4, and 5, which is program presentations, negotiations, and curriculum. So we will move to budget and finance, number 6. And first item is Act 1 tax resolution that Nicole has prepared for us, and I've asked her to go down through that, and then we can have some discussion.
Okay. What is Act 1? Act 1 index is used to determine the maximum tax increase for each tax the school district levies. The base for this year is going to be 3.4%. The highest that we can go this year is 5%. You can see on the paper showing what the collection rate could be if we hit the 5% if needed. I also on the paper have the history of the tax rates at Penns Manor for the past few years. The sheet with all of the information of our borough and townships shows the average for each citizen that owns property, and it shows what it could be at the 5%. Again, this is not a vote to like raise taxes. It's just saying that we won't go above that 5% threshold.
And if you want to take a look at number 2, showing the chart of what our history has been over the past years. So it would be administrative recommendation for you to pass the Act 1 index, indicating to the community that you would not go above the Act 1 index when developing the next fiscal year budget. Questions, comments? Okay. Next, moving along to 6B, authorization to participate in cooperative purchasing program. That would be for us to join with the IU, and simply all we use that program for is to purchase copy paper. So there will just be a motion for us to allow to be part of that consortium for that purchase. Next, letter C, for Reproover requests lump sum payment at the end of the current school year. Request is submitted from Mr. Antonazzi. It's attached for you to consider to approve that lump sum payment at the end of the current school year.
Mr. Johnston,
Under budget and finance. Yes.
in the past, haven't we had in the motion, if funds are available or something, don't we cover ourselves a little bit?
Yes,
Somehow?
that the language will be in there, that if funds are available, so that will be incorporated into the motion. Yes, you're correct.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions under budget and finance? Okay. Next, buildings and grounds. First, and there's an attachment. If you would take a look at it, it says Pittsburgh Stage at the top of that. That is to have all of our rigging and everything inspected on both stages. So that would be the high school stage, elementary stage. Looking at that proposal, there's 2 options. Our recommendation is to go with option number 2. Option number 1, as you can see, includes a preventative maintenance that if we would want them to come out and do something. However, typically if it's identified, Mr. Dalton and anyone can make sure that anything that's recommended is being done on that inspection, we can certainly do that ourselves. So it's our recommendation to get the inspection done and the certification with option number 2 for both stage areas to be done. Total cost of $1,058. Questions, comments on that one?
When was the last time we had that done?
Mr. Dalton, was it 6 years ago? Was the last time it was done?
I believe it was done in 2016.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Not moving to letter B. Consideration and approve an agreement with environmental treatment services effective March 18th for our wastewater treatment plant. So if you would take a look at that proposal sheet, let me give you some explanation. So what Mr. Dalton asked for was for both companies to consider a 3-year agreement. You can see we have, just so that everyone's on the same page, CWM on the right is who's been doing the service in the past. recommendations to go in with environmental treatment services for a couple of reasons. So let me walk down through those. We asked for the 3-year agreement. You can see what the monthly operation fee is. Let's go right down to the monthly total of each company. Environmental treatment is $1,210, and CWM is $1,426. In addition, it's coming time for us to submit for a permit renewal. Environmental treatment services said that would be no cost to do that. CWM is saying it'll be $2,500 for us to get that permit renewal. So you can see right below the monthly totals, monthly savings would be $215.25 going with environmental treatment services. Permit, of course, savings is $2,500. So our recommendation is to go with CWM. Now, with that, or not CWM, environmental treatment services. Just keep in mind, one thing that we would also be doing is Mark would be sending someone down a half an hour each day to do a test where we're not with CWM. But Mark says that that can be done. He would rather do the shift, save the money. He feels that we can get that test done every day that we need to. So any explanation, any additional explanation, Mr. Dalton, you want to say about that?
No, that pretty much covers it. Probably one of the biggest things too is environmental treatment was willing to come in and give us one fixed cost for 3 years versus CWM wants a 5% annual increase.
Correct. Thank you for calling that to my attention. That's true. So first year, that's the price, but the next 2 years of each of those 2 years, they would increase those costs by 5%. Thanks for pointing that out. Other questions, comments, discussion? Okay. Next, 7C. Just to let you know, Mr. Dalton and I are going to start having a couple companies come in and look at the fitness center equipment that's there, just to come up with some type of proposal. Have no idea what direction we'll go. Just the simple fact that that equipment's been there since 2004. The company doesn't exist that's with that equipment. We do have some things that need to be repaired. So it's just putting safety in my mind, question marks. So I would like to have someone come in and take a look at it, come up with a proposal, whether to repair or fix, whether we need to do something differently. So I just wanted to make you aware that we're going to move forward, gather that, and then we'll bring it to you. Okay. Next, 7D, advertise accepting bids for unscreened topsoil. So it doesn't have a number at the top because we just inserted it. Mr. Saffron sent it to me here this afternoon. So it's 2 pages, front and back. First, in fact, Mr. Dalton hasn't even got to see it yet, so I'll make sure he sees it tomorrow. Is the notice of the advertisement. We will set a time, a date and time, that if anybody wants to come and meet with Mark to have any discussion about it, that'll be inserted in the advertisement. Then hoping to get this out so that everything is due back in February 1 at 3 o'clock. And then on the opposite side of that advertisement, there'll be conditions of sales. We won't actually print that in the newspaper. We'll have the opportunity to give that to anybody that comes and wants it. We'll have handouts here. We'll certainly email it to them. So it's just identifying a couple things. One, we want the person to come and look. We want the person to bid on taking it all. Want the person to make sure it's level. Spread some seating on it so that we have it left in the condition that we want. So those are the different things that are listed down through conditions for sales. So if there's anything that when you're looking at that that you would like to change, don't hesitate. We probably will not put this out until after next Thursday. There is no motion to it. We're just putting it out. But if there's anything on there that you want changed, please let us know by next Thursday. Get that out.
Would you keep enough to do some small repairs throughout?
No, Mr. Dalton thought that we could send it all out. All of it. Yep. Is that correct, Mr. Dalton?
Yes, that is correct.
Other questions, comments? Okay, anything else? To go to the order under buildings and grounds. Okay, moving along to athletics, 8A. If we could talk in executive session, we do have applicants for 8A and B. 8A is for the girls varsity volleyball coach. So I had emailed specific information to the athletic committee, told them we would talk this evening how we'll move forward. We'll also talk in executive session, share with you applicants for the junior high head football coach, also in executive session. Any questions, comments? Okay. Moving along, nothing under transportation, nothing under public relations. And so let's move on to policy. So just would like to review our health and safety plan. It's a requirement that after you approve it, which we did back in July, they had to review it 6 months. A couple of things have changed. So I just want to go down through the protocol that we're faced with at this point. With that said, before I get into those, let me just update you on cases so far in our district since we've come back from vacation. At the elementary school, we have 1 employee who's tested positive, 3 students that's tested positive, another 24 students that are out because they're on contact tracing. High school, we have 2 employees that have tested positive and are out. We also have 1 student that is tested as positive and is out, and another 9 on contact tracing, with another handful of additions this afternoon that we made. With that said, if you take a look at the isolation and quarantine protocol, this changes quite often. So now when we're looking at positive cases, it's almost like we have to sit down and interview everyone. So let me just go down through the bullets. I'm not going to go beyond the bullets. Just want you to understand what we're going to follow. And if you certainly object, now's the time to comment. First, a person who is tested positive for COVID-19 must be isolated for 5 days. If after 5 days the individual is asymptomatic or has resolving symptoms, their isolation period is over, but still need to wear a mask around others until after day 10. So that's a change. That change came at 3 o'clock Monday afternoon. So before it was instantly 10, you've got to fulfill it. So that has changed. Second bullet, persons who have been exposed to someone with COVID-19 and have received a booster vaccine or are within 6 months of receiving their primary vaccine series needs to wear a mask around others for 10 days, but do not need to quarantine. Next bullet, persons who are unvaccinated or who are eligible but have not yet received a booster vaccine or was unmasked at the same time of exposure must quarantine at home for 5 days and then wear a mask around others until day 10, as long as the individual has no symptoms. Next bullet, persons who have been exposed to someone with COVID-19 and were wearing a mask properly need to wear a mask around others for 10 days, but do not need to quarantine as long as the individual has no symptoms. And next bullet, persons who have been exposed to someone with COVID-19 and had COVID-19 in the past 90 days do not need to quarantine as long as the individual has no symptoms. So those are what administration is following. Again, the 5 and 5 has switched as of 3 o'clock on Monday. Questions, comments?
There, just clarification, it's 5 days from the point of symptoms, just like it used to be, correct? So
Yes.
okay.
So for example, today, contact tracing students that we addressed at the high school today, they were close contact on Monday, so Tuesday is already day 1 for those folks, even though we weren't telling them until today, which is day 2. And when Mrs. Dolges called parents, and they had the option of coming back in this particular case, coming back in Monday masked or staying out through Thursday. I think she had some each.
Mr. Johnston,
Yes.
when you say it came down Thursday at 3, is that from Department of Ed, CDC? Where's that come from?
Yes. So the 5 and 5s change occurred when CDC put out information over Christmas break. Then in
Right.
turn, on Monday afternoon, the Pennsylvania Department of Health also issued that same guidance out to all superintendents Monday afternoon at 3. Questions? So it takes time. And so when Mrs. Zeglin and Mrs. Dolges are calling and Mr. Grimaldi, it's difficult for parents to understand, to explain to them, okay, here's the different options. Bottom line is this: we want kids to stay in school. So all of this is mitigation efforts to try to have kids in school. Questions? Okay. Next, move along to policies, 11B. So you have a series of policies. I'm not certain to read all these to you, but the Department of Ed revised gifted information. So if you look at the handout that has PSBA at the top of it, it's admin regulation 114.0. So this is for you to peruse through. Again, if you're brand new to us, just want to remind all of you. So we get all of our information through PSBA. When something's done, we take their revisions, we go through them. So how do you know what's being revised? It's in bold. So if you see bold print, except for the very front page of 114 AR0, where it's just definition. But anything after that is in bold, is revised from the previous issue. And that has to do with all gifted education. Everything from AR1 back through to the stack is just simply everything that we use when we go and work with a gifted student. From notice of parents' rights, we'll see that as AR1. We'll see permission to have the student evaluated, AR2. And just so you know, even though these are coming from the PSBA version so that you have an understanding, we also have all these right in our Sapphire. So those are printed out. Next, AR3 is the gifted written report. Next, AR4 is invitation for everyone to come and participate in the gifted team meeting. AR5 is the GIEP itself format. Next is the notice of recommended assignment for that particular gifted student. Next is a notice of intent to reevaluate a student who is already gifted. And then last is a form that's a due process complaint. If a parent ever wants to fill out a complaint and submit that to the department. Questions on that?
Mr. Johnston, how do our parents, do they have to seek this out, all this information, or do we send something out? How do we really follow this well? As I've stated in the
Yes,
past, my concern is we do so much as required by law for the special ed, but it's come up in the near past that, you know, we don't do a lot in high school with our gifted program. It seems to be strong in the elementary, but once we get by 7, do folks know that we have a gifted program, and do they have to search it out, or are we proactive, I guess is the question.
Sure. So let me talk a little bit about the whole gifted part. So one of the goals that Mrs. Delby and I have talked about at some point on our website, we will have every bit of this loaded. So that's both special ed and gifted. What Mr. Hardesty is also referring to is that when we've been meeting with the comprehensive plan, one of the topics that have come up is gifted. So our discussion has been that we do pull out, spend more time with students that are gifted at the elementary level. As students are coming up through the high school, we are not doing that. So one of the goals coming from the comprehensive plan committee that will come to you as a board is to continue, because patterns always been with a gifted student, they'll sort of take care of themselves as they get older. but clearly have been identified to us as we had discussion, and we have students that actually sit on the comprehensive plan. That it would be real nice if that group of students can particularly be together and do research, plan, create things that they want to create. So that is, I know, and you've sat in those, Mr. Hardesty, too, that we've had that discussion, that they feel that that's a lack that we need to address. But as far as the requirements, every single one of these handouts is required. So it's actually every piece that's here is going, a gifted student goes through it, and we'll be dealing with every single AR that's there. So yes, required by law. You need to know as a board, as Mr. Hardesty was discussing, it was brought up in the comprehensive plan that we need to look at high school level gifted program.
I would love to see us spend a fraction for our gifted program of what we spend for our special ed. I know that special ed is required by law, et cetera, et cetera. We have no choice. It seems as if the gifted program, we do have a choice. And I don't think we've made the best choices in the past, and we need to work on it. Whether it be a big pullout, whether it be a whole different type of section, maybe for, I hope we continue to study under Mrs. Dolby and yourself.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnston, just to comment on that. I
Yep,
think
go ahead.
one thing that we need, as the board, a lot might not know, it also looks different at the high school level because of scheduling, that you're able to take electives, you're able to accelerate and maybe move up and take, instead of, algebra 1, you can take an advanced placement or an algebra 2 in the high school, where at the elementary, you can't necessarily do that as easily. Not that it doesn't happen, but gifted sometimes looks a little different at the high school too. So keeping in mind that while it may not be a pull out, that may not meet a lot of students' needs because they're able to be put in different places as well to meet needs.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong too, Wendy, that when you have special education, a lot of times you have a specified learning disability. So you know what you're working towards. When someone's in gifted, it's not so much you're gifted, but that is a wide range. It's kind of a spectrum of, it isn't like, oh, they're gifted in math, we need to give them more math.
It's usually an identified area. So it's usually ELA, math, sometimes sciences, although that's a big fight too. But even though it might say English language arts, what we do with that might look completely different. You can build that into STEM activities and increase vocabulary. And, if this student wants to go into the medical field, so the ELA goal might be more towards sciencey things and learning vocabulary in the medical field rather than doing research and reading a chapter book. So at the high school level, it can look so very different. I just want people to keep that in mind, that I think you're probably doing more than you think you do, and letting people be aware of both ways of doing it.
One thing, like I can speak at the high school level, for example, if a kid's schedule, like if they're in top of year in math, or if they've taken the math classes and they want to take something extra, you can use the GIP to waive a phys ed, but give them an extra math. You can use our Ingenuity program, our online program, to give them different enrichment courses instead of having to take a family consumer science or something here at the district. So we do use the GIP in that sense. Mr. Murphy meets with his gifted kids every week during their flex period, and they work on different things, but they do a lot. Your GIP is used a lot to meet their academic needs. So it's not necessarily a pull out, get together and do something.
At the comprehensive planning, we heard a completely different story from our students. Very disappointed, felt there is nothing going on. It is an area that our students are disappointed in. Mr. Rainey, your son was the biggest speaker of that.
I can speak to this, Mr. Hardesty, because number one, my son's on the comprehensive team, and number two, he's a gifted student. But I think in gifted education at the high school level, one of the things that you do, it's very much self-driven. Okay, I've had experience with students in the past that simply just don't want to take advantage of the opportunities that a gifted program will provide them. And I don't know if you heard the comment, I don't know if Wendy or Michelle who made it, but it's kind of like one of those things where it's like they've got to kind of lay their path out of what they want to do. And then it's the district's responsibility to help them build that path and come up with it and then help deliver it. Where I think a lot of times we view, like in special ed, we might have a class where they're going to support period and they're getting extra help. Gifted is really difficult just to pull out because every kid is kind of developing their own pathway, like Wendy kind of described, where, you know, maybe they're gifted in English language arts, but they want to pursue a science degree. So building that vocabulary in science, where another kid may not have any interest in science whatsoever, and their interest lies in math. So providing them those extra opportunities and deeper understanding of taking Edgenuity classes, taking, I know, like statistics for kids that maxed out the curriculum here already, or even taking dual enrollment classes that offer math opportunities that aren't offered here. Those are all examples, but it's kind of like, it's very difficult because each gifted kid has his own path. And so to kind of get them all together, I understand the frustration of what you're saying because it's true, where kids sometimes just feel like it's more going through the motions and it's not really driving them towards their pathway. So I think the focus, that's what it needs to be on, is making sure that we're meeting with these kids and finding out how deep they want to go and where they want to go and help them develop that path to get there, to that creativity and take their learning to a whole nother level.
And I just think laying that out for the comprehensive planning team, letting them know what it could look like if it doesn't, or, you know, what it may look like now and where we want it to go, that it might look a little like there's different options the way that you lay it out. Pull out might not be the best, but we could do accelerated. We can take additional courses. We can double up on math. We can, those types of things. That was all.
And one of the things that was brought up in the comprehensive, to address what Mr. Hardesty had said, one of the things, the comments that the kids had made is that they felt there was a lack of activities together as a group. That they wanted more of a group activity, maybe the older kids meeting with the younger kids doing an activity. So that was one of the things we had said through the comprehensive plan that we would address. But like Mr. Rainey had said, a lot of times when you're creating a master schedule at the high school, having the senior gifted kid who's loaded in calc, physics, Chem 2, Prob Stats, free to meet with the 7th grader who has, you know, a Common Core math, it's very hard to find that common time for them to do stuff without them missing their core classes. So that was one of the things that the kids did say they wanted to do that we can work on.
And sometimes when given those extra opportunities for the kids, like Mrs. Dolges was saying, they're so maxed out in the highest level classes that we offer, sometimes they're just like, uncle, that's enough, I'm good. Because they look at it as almost like I'm expected to do more, especially when it's doing more in something they really don't have an interest in doing, if that makes sense. That's why it's so important to kind of drive them and help develop that path into what they're looking for, what they're wanting to explore, and help them explore that deeper.
How many are in that program? Is it a lot of kids, or is it just a few?
Not very many. You have what, 8?
I think I have 8 or 9 at the high school. And I think at the elementary, there's 5 or 6. So you're talking about, you know, 12.
Is it a
15.
parental requirement to do it, or do we actively seek out?
I know both.
My concern is we spend so much for special ed, and I think that our smart ones that are in gifted or can be gifted are let alone. You keep saying it has to be self-motivated. What I gathered from the student at the comprehensive meeting, we do not do it. Are we doing the best we possibly can, folks? It's clear to me that me being a non-educator, I don't know what's going on, but you three that have spoke sound like you're saying, oh, there's nothing we can do. I think we can do better.
Well, I don't disagree, John. I think we can do better. So to clarify, because I made that comment you referenced, is what I'm trying to say is if a student doesn't get engaged in helping building that, what he wants to explore and go deeper in, it's very difficult for an educator to say, oh, like if you told my son you're doing a bunch of science, he'd be totally against that idea. You know, so he has, if he wants a greater, deeper opportunity, he has to take ownership in helping develop that opportunity with his, but Mr. Murphy, our gifted teacher and stuff like that. So I think, like, I guess what I'm trying to say, just to make sure I'm being clear about it, is I don't mean it's like, okay, Johnny, you got to go out and do it on yourself. You got to be self-motivated. I'm just saying is he has to be at least motivated enough to know what he wants to help develop his plan. Each kid gets to sit in on a gifted IEP or a special ed or an IEP, and they should be part of the team and part of that process. And I think that that's where maybe it's lacking some. And there's nothing that we do that we can't do better. If we think we've arrived somewhere, then we need to all get out of what we're doing. I totally agree with that comment. You know, I don't think we're terrible. I don't think we're ignoring it. I just think that we need to do a little bit better of getting the kids to understand that they have to take some ownership in helping us help them explore things that they want to explore at a much deeper level than they already are.
And to
You know-
answer your question about
Who's
parent
Who's this?
being driven, this is Wendy. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Thank you.
With parents, it doesn't have to be parent driven. So if teachers see a student is excelling and showing qualities of a gifted student, they can request that the student be evaluated. Or if the parent feels that their child is gifted, they can request that their child be evaluated for the gifted program. The only thing is the parent must agree that their child can be in that program. So some students may test in and tell their parents, I don't want any part of it, and the parent says no, then the child would not be in the gifted program. So it does require parent approval, but they don't have to be the ones that ask. The school can also be ones that identify the child and request that the parents let them be evaluated. That help?
It helps.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying. Are we actively promoting the gifted program? Then I'm going to hush up. Do we do it, Mrs. Zaglin? Do we do it, Mrs. Golly, I just lost it. Mrs. Dozier, Mr. Johnston. You were there, Mrs. Dalton, you were there. And we were listening to those students, and they did nothing but say that we are dropping the ball. And they are our brightest students that are on that committee. And I think your son, he's the one that was saying that we're dropping the ball, Mr. Rainey. Is that?
I can speak on both sides of it. This is Mrs. Dolges. I can speak on both sides of it as the administrator, but also both of my sons that attend here are both in the gifted program. I always think there's room for improvement. There's things that I brought up at meetings that I would like to see a little bit different. You know, things that I've talked to Dr. Schallenbarger about. She does a very good job with my kids. I think that we do a job promoting it. Not as much at the secondary level, because usually by the time the kids get to the secondary level, they've been identified. It's not very common to identify a student in the gifted program at the secondary level. Most of the time, the discrepancy between the gifted students, it's more identified at the elementary level. But as far as you know, I do think there's room for improvement. I do think we could utilize those students to do different things. I agree with that. But as a parent, you know, I look at it from both perspectives. So like I'm on the administrative side, but I'm also on the parent side of it. But both of my students, I did not request my kids to be evaluated, both of them were recommended by a teacher. So our teachers are watching and identifying students who are excelling.
And Mr. Hardesty, this is Mrs. Eglin.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
have monthly grade level meetings where we talk about students. We have MTSS process where we identify those students who on both ends of the spectrum. So it's not just who needs the special education for perhaps a learning disability, but it's both sides. The thing with gifted is not just a program that someone wants to be in. To be categorized as gifted, there is a litany of things to check off the boxes. There is a reason why Mrs. Dolges's children are in the gifted program, because they tested high enough to qualify for that. So again, this is not just an extra program that anyone can sign up for. There is a process, and we are following that process.
There's been no complaint. Those students said in elementary, it was great, it was active, but when we got to high school, it is disappointing. I'm just sharing that. Thank you very much for your time.
In the elementary, they have a challenge time. Like my kids go to challenge 2 days a week, and they go with other kids in their grade and they do activities together. Like Mr. Rainey had said, and I had said, at the secondary level, they don't necessarily have that common time. And I think that was a lot of the concern that the elementary or that the secondary kids had, that we don't have that common time.
And I'm hearing you, Mr. Hardesty. I sat in those meetings too. And so by hearing what we see is going on and knowing what the program does, where we lack is we probably have not taken enough time to take those group of high school gifted students, and Mrs. Delby and I can certainly do that, and just sit in this room and have conversation, because we just may not have shared with them and listened to them. Because you're right, they said, the comment is, boy, it would be nice, the things that we could do for the district and take off of maybe even some employees' hands and do would be using us. I mean, that was actually shared with us. So we'll sit down and Mrs. Delby and I will sit down with those high school gifted students and have that conversation, because I think what they're trying to say is, boy, we would like to work together and show you what the group of us can do. So
Thank you very
we
much.
will do that.
One comment, like was John's talking about the high school, and we know that there's 5 in elementary and there's 8. How many teacher referrals do we get from the high school level to say, hey, this person needs to be evaluated? Do we get many of that, or is it usually just the elementary that gets up through? Okay, because
I would say actually every single one that we have right now, just trying to think through it, I would say all of them, maybe one was at a junior high level. All the rest of them has been identified through the process of the elementary.
because maybe that's where you could maybe have a little bit more improvement, because like Jody mentioned, when you're talking to try to create your own career path or your pathway, it's hard for me to believe that there's an elementary kid that understands what that pathway is going to be at that elementary level. Now, the time you get into the junior high, senior high, you probably have, you're more driven for sure, and you might have a better opportunity. But if you really don't know that process of that, and you don't get a referral from a teacher, you could go through math classes and ace everything and say, this is boring for me, because I hear a lot of that at home now. So, if that opportunity is there, maybe that's something to, look at, because you hate to have that just occur in the elementary, but there's potential in the high school that you could maybe have more of a.
Good point. And we could have that discussion and certainly have something in professional development in the very near future for the secondary level, just to remind them of watching for that, processing that, because you're right. We have definitely a solid process at the elementary.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
A lot of times when there's that, and I don't know. like,
It's
see it.
very rare to identify a student at the high school level. Not impossible, and it does happen. Some kids kind of miss going through, but because the discrepancy in the testing, so the standardized test that they give them, that gap closes. So it's very hard to identify just by the normal IQ and the acceleration because we're meeting their needs differently at the high school. Like I said, they might be placed in a higher math class where they don't have that need without even having a GIP. But I mean, we're right, making sure teachers are aware that if they're seeing someone like, hey, we're doing, this work is easy for them, making that referral, it's just very hard to identify at that level.
A student that gets straight A's, is that a possibility, or is that a point to look at? I just don't know how we do it.
I didn't hear what he
I
just
don't
said.
know.
Straight A's.
Mr. Hardesty, when you had your hand, Mr. Hardesty, when you had your hand up, we didn't hear what you said.
If a student has straight A's, is that an indicator? Is that when we ought to be talking, whether, can't hear me? Let me turn this off.
That's
We can
not
hear-
really
yeah,
an
We can
indicator.
hear you. We can hear you fine, John.
Oh, sorry.
It would just be one criteria to look at, to say to someone, hey, look, but that's not necessarily the identifying factor.
Okay. Thank y'all. Thank you very much.
Other questions, comments on those? Next, 11C, approve procurement updates to policies. The two policies and attachment just simply is changing the amount of dollar. So for example, let's look under competitive bid for policy 610. You can see looking just right under competitive bid. After public notice advertising competitive bid, go to number 1, purchase furniture, equipment, and things of that sort. That amount is changing to $21,900. Previous was set at $21,300. And again, that is governmental driven, coming down through PSBA. So again, bold is what's changing. If you go to the second page of that same policy, going down under price quotations, you'll go on down to see that those figures are changing again. Bottom level number, furniture, equipment, supplies, cost based on an amount of more than 11,800, but less than 21,900 for price quotations. So that's the different level going from competitive bid on the first page to the second page where you're talking about just getting price quotes. So all it is in these three next attachments is just taking a look at changing that figure. Questions on those? Okay, next, nothing for correspondence, number 12, new business, number 13. 13A, accept the resignation due to retirement from Mr. Frontino as the elementary art teacher. And again, that letter is part of an attachment, so we'll have a motion. Next, 13B, hire an instructional assistant. That's a result of Mrs. Kirsch accepting her resignation last month. We'll talk about that in executive session. 13C, approve payment for Alpha program at the Indiana County Guidance Center. So there's a handout after the policies for that. Our portion, and it's calculated by all the schools that send to there based on their average daily membership. Our total cost was $3,419.81 for the coming year based upon figures from 2021. Questions? Okay, next, 13D, approve FMLA requests from employee, and I'll talk about that in executive session in more detail. 13E, we last month talked about the special education plan, so we would have a motion next week for you to approve the district special education plan. That's just a portion of the whole comprehensive plan, but we will have a separate motion for special education. Questions, comments? 13F, approve an MOU with PMEA. We'll talk about that in detail in executive session. And 13G, we do have a substitute to approve Rebecca Mack into the support staff. And those are everything that I have for open session. Any other items for discussion in open session. We will have executive session for those items that I identified.
Sorry, Mr. Crosby. I see the 13A to accept the resignation due to retirement, but should there be one to post and advertise?
It'll all be the same. Other questions, clarifications? Okay. That's for open session. Mr. Packer. The rest will be in executive session. Yep, we just need to give Mr. Grambling enough time to get us off the air, but keep Mr. Hardesty and Mr. Dalton attached.